All right. We'll give it 2 minutes, but we'll do the introductions. Hi, everybody. My name is Russell Kahn. I'm the state president of the Democratic Environmental Caucus. This is our Estuary Science Committee Forum on the Indian River Lagoon. Richard is our state science officer, Richard Whitman, Dr. Richard Whitman, and he's going to be leading us and introducing Ms. Kathleen Hill, who is the speaker tonight, as the vice or the second in charge, I believe, of the Indian River Lagoon for Dr. Freese. Apologies if I got any of those names mispronounced. But Richard, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
For those that are here, I'd like to introduce Kathy Hill. Kathy is pitch hitting for Dr. Duane DeFreeze, who can't make it tonight, suffering from he lost his voice and he's got bronchitis, and Kathy has graciously agreed to take his place. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida's Science Committee. The Science Committee is made up of science officers and science advisors from caucuses throughout the state. The topic tonight is focused on one of Florida's most challenging environmental problems, the Indian River Lagoon ecological crisis. The lagoon is a harbinger of numerous ecological disasters facing estuaries throughout Florida. Let's learn from the past and current poor management practices that we've experienced in the lagoon, as well as the other waters that receive nutrient-rich and other pollutants downstream and along the coast. My hopes is we can save our estuaries while we still can. Kathy is the Deputy Director of the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program, and she will present a topic called Saving Florida's Coastal Estuaries, Some Lessons from Indian River Lagoon. Kathy graduated from the University of Massachusetts with a degree in biology, and she got her master's degree in marine biology from Florida Institute of Technology. She has conducted lagoon research for 9 years at the Smithsonian Marine Station in Florida before joining the National Estuary Program in 2007, where she worked initially on outreach and education coordination, and she's now has been since I think 18, the Deputy Director. Kathy, thank you so much for agreeing to talk at this late date, and I do hope that Dr. DeFreeze recover soon. I'll leave it up to you now.
Great. Thank you very much, Richard. Appreciate the introduction. And thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. Duane does send his apologies. He cannot make a sound with his voice right now. So he just could not be here, and he apologizes. So I'm going to share my screen and get going. Oops, come on. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right. So the title of the talk tonight is Responding to an Estuary in Crisis. And what I'm going to do today is kind of go over, I've got 3 things I want to go over with you. One is just an overview of kind of the ecological and social characteristics of the lagoon for those of you who aren't familiar with our awesome ecosystem on this coast. Then I'm going to do a summary of the issues that are really affecting all estuaries, but I'm going to use the lagoon as a case study. And then lastly, I'm going to just end with an overview of our program, what the IRL NEP is and what we do, and sort of where we're directing our energies to kind of improve things. All right, so ecologically, the Indian River Lagoon is really special and really vulnerable. So one of the reasons our program exists is because of the long, narrow features of the estuary. So it's 156 miles long. It's 5 miles wide at its widest point. It has 3 water bodies. So there is Mosquito Lagoon, sort of spanning Volusia County and northern Brevard County. There's the Indian River Lagoon itself, and there is the Banana River in the Cocoa area of Brevard. The watershed's 2,200 square miles. Spatially and temporally really complex. We span 2 climatic zones, so the subtropical and the temperate. And that line is shifting north as climate change becomes more pronounced in this area. We're seeing mangroves, which used to be temperature limited to sort of around the Ponce de Leon inlet area. They're now migrating up the coast, and you can find them much further north than we ever thought that they would be. The lagoon itself is narrow and shallow. It's sort of like a big bathtub, you know, at its deepest, it's, you know, the channels down the center of the lagoon are dredged to keep them open for navigation. But otherwise, most of the lagoon is about 4 feet deep. So we take people out kayaking from time to time, and we always tell them, if you tip over, don't worry, just stand up. But that long, skinny characteristic of the lagoon kind of makes it act like a big bathtub. So if pollutants get into the lagoon, they tend to stay there. And so we have long water residence times. Biologically speaking, the lagoon is an awesome playground for biologists. We've got over 4,400 species here, highly biodiverse ecosystem. And we're not sure what, you know, the current conditions are doing to that. But, you know, we've got 4,400 documented species. Whether all of those are still around it now, we don't know. But we're going to push for some research to see how that, you know, if we can redocument those species or document at least what we've lost. And then lastly, the lagoon is microtidal, meaning that tides are only really important where there are inlets. Most of the system transport is done by the wind. Socially, the system is complex also. So again, it's 40% of Florida's east coast, 156 miles. It spans the 3 water bodies, only has 5 inlets that exchange water with the ocean. 5 counties directly border the lagoon, but 7 counties touch the watershed. We've got about 1.6 million residents, 38 incorporated cities and towns. As you can imagine, with an area that large, it's multiple agencies, multiple oversight, working on multiple problems on multiple scales. But the reason that everybody is concerned is because the lagoon is economically valuable. So in 2016, there was a study done by East Central Florida and Treasure Coast Regional Planning Councils. And they determined through an extensive economic study that annually the lagoon is worth about $7.6 billion, and that it returns per dollar of investment in restoration, the lagoon returns about $33 in value. So that is a pretty decent ROI. It shows that the lagoon economy is a driver of the regional economy. And, you know, restoring the lagoon, obviously, if you can get 33-to-1 return on investment for the current condition of the lagoon, if you make the lagoon better, that ROI will go up. And that's one of the reasons that lots of folks are now getting on the bandwagon to realize how important the lagoon is. So even if you don't care about the social aspects of it, even if you don't care about the biological specialness of it, you can care about the economy of it. All right, so the issues affecting estuaries, and these issues are not, they're not isolated in our lagoon. These are issues that every estuary in the country is dealing with. But for us, we've got basically 4 things. We've got poor water quality, loss of seagrasses, algae blooms, and wildlife impacts. So when you talk about water quality, you start with stormwater. That's one of our biggest issues. You have a rainfall that falls, you've got a lot of paved surfaces, they call those impervious surfaces, and water that can't soak into the ground has to go somewhere, and they call that stormwater runoff. When you don't have a natural system, the water runs down the nearest, you know, off your roof, down your driveway, into the nearest swale, into the nearest storm drain, and then in this area, at least, it runs unfiltered out to the lagoon. So stormwater is a conveyance for any kind of pollution that can be left on the ground. We also deal quite regularly with wastewater spills from broken infrastructure. where you have a wastewater treatment plant where there's a pipe broken. Titusville, you might have read about, has been having issues with that. Palm Bay this year has had issues with it. So there's quite a number of times over the last few years that we've had wastewater spills and also groundwater seepage. So until recently, nobody really paid much attention to groundwater as a pollutant source, but it turns out there are pollutants that are carried in groundwater. Muck is not unique to the lagoon, but we do have a lot of it. There's an estimate that about 12 to 15% of the lagoon bottom is covered by muck. And if you've never had the pleasure of losing a shoe in the muck, what it is sort of a thick black mayonnaise consistency. It stinks because there's a lot of sulfur in it and a lot of dead stuff. And it's basically 60 to 70% eroded soils, fine clays, sediments, and the rest of it is decaying organic matter. And again, that's dead stuff. So it's dead plants, it's dead animals, it's pet waste, it's anything that can be put into stormwater and run off and find its way into the lagoon. And muck is an issue because it's the gift that keeps on giving. Muck does something called flux. And what it does is all of that organic material releases nitrogen from time to time, and muck constantly releases nitrogen. And in some cases, when there's low oxygen, it actually switches from fluxing nitrogen to fluxing phosphorus. Both of those things are considered nutrients. Both of them are pollutants. And muck can stay around if it doesn't get removed. It can stay around, 200 years and just keep fluxing nutrients back into the water column to create more pollution. In the southern lagoon and also in the western part of the state, around the Caloosahatchee discharges of fresh water. In our region, it's from Lake Okeechobee discharges and also local basins in Martin and St. Lucie County. When they open those floodgates, they are massive discharges. It can be billions of gallons a day, and it can actually turn the estuary fresh. So estuaries are usually brackish. Our lagoon is usually partly salty. And when they release all that fresh water, it can turn the entire, not the entire lagoon, but the lagoon where those water impacts are. And again, that's mostly Martin and St. Lucie County. It turns the estuary fresh. And you can imagine if you have animals that are adapted to living in salt water, they don't do well in fresh water. And it also does something, you notice the pictures on the bottom there. The green algae that you see there, that is a freshwater algae. So it thrives in fresh water. It doesn't like salt so much. And when you get a bloom like that, what tends to end it is that the bloom or the discharges stop, they cease. And then the bloom eventually dies because the conditions then are too salty for it. But it does love fresh water, and that's when we get those toxic algae blooms in the south. So we've been dealing on this coast with a massive loss of seagrass since 2010 and 2011. You can see in the top photo, I just wanted to give you a comparison of what we're dealing with. So in the top photo, any of those, I hope you can see my cursor. There's a channel running right here. That is a channel for navigation, so that's a boat channel. Don't worry about that. But all of these dark areas that you see everywhere along here, all of that are seagrass beds. In 2009, we had more seagrass in the lagoon than we had had since the 1940s. It was a great success. Everybody was feeling great about how good seagrass in the lagoon was doing. And then we had 2 cold winters in 2010 and 2011. And in the spring of 2011, we had this massive, massive algae bloom. It was bigger and more extensive and more long lasting than anybody had ever seen. It got its own name. They called it the super bloom. And by 2012, so that bloom lasted about 18 months. And by 2012, you can see in the bottom picture, there's almost no seagrass left. You can see little bits of it around some of the spoil islands here, but where you do see that seagrass, that water's only ankle deep. So anything that was deeper than ankle deep was killed. There was hope that in the next year, the seagrass would come back, but that did not happen. And I'll show you a graph in a minute about what that looks like today. So algae blooms kill seagrass. They also cause other issues. So these are two of the more significant blooms. We've had a lot of blooms since 2010 and 2011. The top picture here is a brown tide bloom that happened in both 2013 and 2016. That particular photo is from 2016. And the bottom one is a Pico nanocyanobacterium that bloomed in fall of 2020. So that photo is from 2020. And that one was from the Banana River. And then when you have when you have algae blooms, you also get fish kills that happen. The top photo is sort of your run-of-the-mill kind of fish kill, where it's small size classes of fish. It's usually the young of the year, usually only one or two different species. The bottom photo is from 2016. That was the most extensive fish kill we've ever seen. And these are from some of the canals in the Cocoa Beach area, where the algae bloom was dying. That decay process, when the blooms die, that decay process uses up the oxygen in the water, and fish, if they can't move away and you have a really big bloom where it's using up all the oxygen, those animals just float up to the top. And you can see in that picture that it's multiple species, it's multiple size classes. That bloom killed everything. And then today we also are dealing with not just fish kills, but also manatee impacts and other wildlife impacts. So what's the root of the problem? We all kind of tend to think about these things separately, but if you look at all those issues up there, they all really boil down to just one thing, that we're putting way too many nutrients into the lagoon, and the lagoon is well past the point where it can just absorb those. So our program is working hard to put the lagoon on a nutrient diet, and not only us, but our partners as well. So what's a nutrient? Just for those of you who don't know, I don't mean to turn this into a science lesson, but I want you to understand what I'm talking about. So if you think about your bag of fertilizer, there are always three numbers on your bag. The first one is nitrogen. Nitrogen is what makes plants green. Second one is phosphorus. That's what makes your roots be effective. And then we're not going to discuss potassium, so we can leave that out of the discussion. What we'll care about is nitrogen and phosphorus. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and suspended solids. Those are the three things we think about when we think about pollution in the lagoon. So total nitrogen, you'll see TN a lot if you're reading through papers and things, reports. TN comes from fertilizers, obviously, pesticides, septic tanks, pet waste, lawn trimmings, any kind of plant material. If it's grown on fresh water, once it hits the salt water in the lagoon, it's going to die and sink to the bottom and cause muck, where muck then continues to flux nutrients. Also included in that, if you have dead animals, so if you have a fish kill and all the fish sink to the bottom and die and decay, that's going to fuel future algae blooms as well. Phosphorus, TP, comes from fertilizers, detergents, pet wastes, muck again, dead animals, and solids come from the eroded soils. So if you're not doing soil control on big construction sites, or even if you're just a gardener and you're throwing stuff into your neighborhood canal, that contributes to solids. And trash, debris, fine sand, all of that contributes to what a nutrient is. So how did we get here? Our canal systems became, during the early part of the last century, these canals that we built to drain the wetlands and literally drain the swamp and make the land useful, became conveyors for nutrients to load directly into the lagoon. And what I'm going to show you here, this is a real area in southern Brevard County, and I'm not picking on this particular water control district. It's just that I have a map of what their district looks like. So I want to show you that. So prior to the 1900s, this is the natural watershed of the lagoon. The lagoon is here in blue. The green part of the map is the St. Johns River Basin. The brown part of the map is the natural lagoon watershed. And here, where there's the dividing line, that's sort of where I-95 got built. I-95 is a natural high point in the land. And so you can visualize it. If you're on the east side of 95, your water would go to the lagoon. If you were on the west side of 95, your water would go to the St. Johns River. So in the 1920s, Florida instituted special taxing districts. And this one here is the Melbourne-Tillman Water Control District. And I'm not picking on them particularly because water control districts are all up and down the coast. But this is what it looked like. So they had this area of land. They wanted to make it useful. So the idea was you had to drain it. And then you could build housing or ranches or orchards. And what that looked like is this. So once these were completed, all of the water on them now went to the lagoon. So that's about 100 square miles in the Palm Bay area in Brevard County that never used to go to the lagoon, but now does. And so we've increased the size of the watershed all along the coast, not just here, but just in this little area. With the canal system increased the watershed size about 146%. And this is what that map looks like. So I'm just going to run a little animation here. There is a central canal that runs right here in the middle. That is the C1 canal. And no matter where you are in this system, all those canals, and this is a residential area. I live in this area. I live right on this canal here. All of those canals drain into this C1 canal, which drains directly into little tiny Turkey Creek, and then straight out into the lagoon. And since the early 1900s, all along the coast, there's been an 89% loss of wetlands and an over 300% increase in channelization. So this becomes our conveyor for pollution that goes to the lagoon. So why do we care about that? If you put nutrients in, what does it do? So if you have a balanced ecosystem, and the photo here, the graphic here is showing sort of a balanced ecosystem. You have seagrasses growing along the lagoon bottom. You've got a nice healthy sediment where the seagrasses are exchanging oxygen and nutrients and things. You've got microalgae, which are one single cell algae in the water. Those are always present. They're not bad. They're actually food for a lot of organisms. And when you have a balanced system, when you have nutrients going in, everything gets what it needs. And then those nutrients are used up. And there's no algae blooms, there's no fish kills, there's no nothing, because the system's in balance. Everybody gets what they need and there's no excess. What happens when you have excess nutrients though? Algae grow because they're just a single cell. They grow much faster than seagrasses. They can take those nutrients up much faster. And when they do that, they bloom. So a bloom is just out of control growth of single-celled algae. And what that does is it shades the surface water and doesn't allow light to penetrate to where the seagrasses are. Now, eventually, those blooms will use up the nutrients that are available, or they will just end up killing themselves because there's so much biomass there. They're not all getting enough sun. So they eventually do subside. And again, when they subside and die, the decay process uses up the oxygen in the water and you can have a fish kill. So that's really why we care about nutrient pollution and why stormwater is one of our big problems. Just going to show you some pictures of some of the recent ones. I didn't include any of the super bloom because it's sort of redundant to what I'm going to show you. So this was the 2013 and 2016 cyanobacteria bloom in the southern part of the lagoon. This bloom was toxic. It killed a bunch of pets and made some people sick. This one again is the brown tide from 2013 and 2016. That one again is 2016. There's the fish kill from 2016. Again, the 2 year ago Banana River bloom. And then the result of all of that is we still have not had seagrass recovery. So we've been in this cycle since about 2011 of almost continuous algae blooms. And there's been an ecological shift, most biologists think, in the system from one that's dominated by seagrass to one that's dominated by algae blooms. And this photo is from last winter. You can see beautiful clear water. You can see the bottom of the lagoon here. You can see these folks out here walking on the sandbar at the Spoil Island. What you don't see here are seagrasses, and they should be there, but we're not seeing that. So we've had an 89% loss of seagrass cover since 2009. And now we're having manatee and wildlife impacts. So all of that is the result of loss of seagrass. So I'm just going to show you this real quick. I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but just look at this bar here where it says 1943. that's sort of what seagrass was doing before people lived here, you know, when there were very few residents of Florida. We know this because this was the first time they flew planes over Florida. They were getting ready to enter World War II, and they had these high definition cameras. And somebody at the Water Management District found all these historical photos and decided to map the seagrasses to see what they looked like in 1943. So we have sort of a baseline for what seagrasses used to look like. And notice that through the years, you're going to see sort of an upward trend all the way up to 2007. A little bit of a bump down in 2009, but right here, 2007 to 2009, there's more seagrass in the lagoon than there had ever been. Then we get the super bloom that happened, and that killed 40% of the seagrasses right off the bat. We had a couple of years of recovery in these years here. 2016 was our last huge algae bloom. And then after that happened, seagrasses just have been struggling to even hang on. They're not recovering, they're just barely hanging on. And so the green bars are the area where you can have seagrass. The black line is how much cover. So how thick is it when it occurs? How thick is it? And you can see that it's not very thick. It's 90% loss at this point. So when you have that, you're going to get manatee starvation. Manatees rely on seagrasses for food. If you don't have seagrasses, you don't have habitat, you don't have food resources, and so you get starving manatees. And just call out the top picture here for you. The FWC website has lots of photos of this. If you're interested in it, I would direct you there. I didn't know how detailed to go into this, but I did want to mention manatees. But just notice that animal and how flat it is. That is classic characterization of what starvation looks like in a manatee. They should be fat and happy and round. And when you see that, and you see sort of the peanut head, where you can see a little indentation in the back of their necks, kind of makes their heads look like peanuts. That is classic sign of starvation, and that those animals were not doing well before they died. So since 2020, so sort of the winter of 2020 into 2021, we lost about 1,100 manatees. Some of them were rescued, and FWC, to their credit, prioritized rescuing live animals rather than removing dead ones. But that caused sort of a problem in Brevard County, where the way that the wind blew the carcasses, they all ended up kind of on, they all kind of ended up in one area. And it became just, people were infuriated to have all these, dead, rotting manatee carcasses all in one place. But they did manage to rescue 141 of them and rehabilitated them. But 1,000 manatees is a lot. This last winter, there was a multi-agency task force that we worked with. And FWC, U.S. Fish and Wildlife worked over the wintertime to provision manatees in Brevard County that were gathered at the FPL power plant, and to, just kind of feed them enough so that it would hold them over during the cold snap before they migrated on to their, once the water warms up, they leave their refuges and they go to other grounds. This year in 2022 so far, and this is as of last week, we've lost 515 manatees statewide. 314 of those were in Brevard County alone, and they've rescued 57. So somewhat fewer deaths than last year to date, but it kind of remains to be seen what the rest of the year is going to hold, because a lot of the animals that are left are in pretty tough shape. This is from FWC. This is a graphic of what the carcasses have looked like this year. So this is only data from this year, and it's only from the Atlantic coast. And I just want to call your attention to the green areas where they did a full necropsy. A necropsy is an animal autopsy, where they take tissue samples, they open them up, they look at the organs, they look at the tissues, they look at the blood, they look at everything. So starvation is in green, and that's from fully necropsied animals. Notice the blue bars here, that VNN means verified but not necropsied. So they examined these animals, but they didn't do a full necropsy. And out of those, and of course that's the largest size class, Out of those, the ones with the cross-hatching here were starvation deaths. So we know that manatees in the lagoon are starving. In 2021, lost about 9 to 11% of the herd, and they think that herd consists of something between 7,500 and 10,200 animals. So losing 9 to 11% of your herd is not a good thing. In this year, we've already lost 5 to 7%. So clearly this is not sustainable. If we want to have manatees in Florida, we need to do something a little more drastic for them. But really, what is our issue? You know, you have to think about that. Do we have a manatee issue or do we have a clean water issue? And I'll refer you back to where we started with this. What we have is a clean water issue. Manatees are a symptom of poor water quality in the lagoon. So if we can get a handle on our water quality issues, that's going to allow seagrasses to come back. It'll reduce algae blooms and manatees will be fat and happy once more. But really what we've got is manatees are dying because they're starving, because there's no seagrass, because we have bad water quality. And this is sort of the big picture of what this looks like. So we've got multiple pollutants coming from multiple sources and multiple pathways. So, you know, in some parts of the lagoon, remember the lagoon is long and skinny. What happens in one part of the lagoon is not the same thing as what happens in another part of the lagoon. So in some areas, we've got agricultural runoff. In some areas, we have urban runoff. In some areas, it's residential runoff. So all of those kinds of factors come into play. We also have a muck issue in the lagoon where we're fluxing nutrients constantly. We've got groundwater entering the lagoon. And all of this is contributing to poor water quality. But again, at the base of this, we have a nutrient issue. The lagoon needs to be put on a nutrient diet. So I'm going to end by kind of talking about some of our programs. So we are the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. We're one of 28 national estuaries in the US. These are authorized by Congress as estuaries of national significance. And you can see the map there of where our national estuaries are. We have a unique network governance model that kind of governs our program. We are governed not from the top down, but from the bottom up. We are run by a board that consists of all of our funding partners. So the members of our board, we have 8 members, and I'll show you where our funding comes from in a moment. But the board of directors is sort of our policy board. They set the policy and set the direction for the program. In forming that policy board, though, we have a management board and a finance subcommittee. And the management board is mostly the natural resource practitioners. So we've got a lot of folks working in county governments for natural resources departments. We've got state employees. We've got a lot of folks that are well informed about natural systems and how they work and how they function. We also have a STEM advisory committee. That's our science board. And they represent the 24 science and research organizations, excuse me. 24 science and research organizations that work in and around the lagoon. We also have a citizens advisory committee that is made up of educators and just concerned citizens, people with networks that they interact with and who bring issues to us. And we do sort of the two-way communication with the public through that committee. And then we have other folks, the affiliated scientists, an innovator and investor network, and just regular citizens. So in our management conference, and everybody is in the sunshine, we have 110 members now. All of them are in the sunshine. You know, from a government perspective, it's a lot to manage, but all of our internal communications go through this management conference structure. So all the decisions of the program are made through the management conference. The committees make recommendations to the policy board, and the policy board can either accept those or, you know, kind of do their own thing with it. They mostly, though, to their credit, they have relied heavily on our management board and our STEM and our citizens committee for advice and input. And they have not yet broken with them. So they often, always actually, take the advice, take the recommendation, and move forward in the way that the management conference wants to move. So our vision is a healthy ecosystem, a healthy community,
and feed birds. So there's Bob White's out here.
and a healthy economy. Our mission is one community, one lagoon, one community, one voice. You'd think I'd know that by now, but I often just misspeak that one. We promise clean water for people and nature. That's our goal and what we are striving for every day. And you can see the goals for the program are water and sediment quality that support the estuary, healthy estuary that supports endangered species, fisheries, commerce, recreation, quality of life, all of the things that people want. We want to keep public awareness up and make sure that we have a well-informed, educated public. And we want to have long-term recurrent funding for restoration projects and programs. We do, as part of our role, is a comprehensive conservation and management plan. That's a mouthful, so we usually just say CCMP. This is perhaps the oldest management plan for the lagoon. The first one was done in 1995, and we update it about every 10 years. So our newest one is available on our website on the resources tab. You can look through that. We are getting it laid out as an ebook right now, so that will be available shortly. I'm just making the final edits to that as it goes through publication, but there will be an ebook on that shortly. But let me show you just a little bit about the CCMP. So this wheel, we call it our vital signs wheel. This is the heart of our CCMP. It's broken down into 5 areas. Well, it starts with 3. So it starts with one lagoon, which is our mission, one community, and one voice. And the one lagoon areas, there are 3 areas. So there's water quality areas in this sort of dark blue here. We have habitats, and we have living resources, so our species. All of that comes under the one lagoon category. Healthy communities are the things for quality of life and for people. And then this gold category here, communicate, collaborate, coordinate, that's our one voice. And we kind of are reserving that for ourselves. So these functions here are functions that the NEP takes on. So we work on policy, we work on engagement, we work on implementation and financing, science and technology. All of those are the strengths of our program and where we work sort of in the space of fixing the lagoon. We have developed a couple of strategic plans, more than a couple now. There are a couple that are out. Those are available on our resources page. We've got a climate ready estuary report that was the result of a 2-year study. We have a financial strategy that's on the street now. We are working on a monitoring plan and a habitat restoration plan, and our communications plan is on the web as well. So all of those are available for download or will be shortly. This is where our funding comes from. So our sponsor is the IRL Council. That was established in 2015 solely to be the host of the NEP. And this removed our program from the St. Johns River Water Management District, where it had lived since 1990, giving local communities more input and more control into the program. And so it went from having the governing board of the district making policy decisions to having all of these funders making policy decisions. So on an annual basis, we've got about $2.1 to $2.3 million. The bulk of that comes from US EPA. So we are an EPA program. We also get $500,000 each from St. John's and South Florida water management districts. We get $250,000 from DEP. And then each of the bordering counties on the lagoon pitch in $50,000. And each of them gets a seat on the board. It's the elected officials that appoint the members of the management conference. The agency folks do not take part in that, so it's all driven by the elected officials. And excitingly, beginning this year, we have received and will receive an additional somewhat over $900,000 from the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act for 5 years. So that's a 5-year appropriation. We're going to get almost $1 million extra to put out into the lagoon for projects. So our project funding basically goes into 4 categories. We do an annual request for proposals every year for water quality projects, for habitat restoration projects, for community-based restorations, which is restoration projects that involve the community. So this could be oyster restoration, clam restoration, shoreline restoration. And then we reserve about $100,000 a year for innovative technology and research from the community. So you can see where our funding has gone. And if you notice between these categories, the funding among the counties is pretty even. And that was not by design. We had some concerns early on when this structure was first established that there'd be some infighting for, counties trying to get more of their share. But we have a policy that the best projects rise to the top regardless of what county they're in. But it turns out that, counties can only do projects so fast. So if somebody gets money in 1 year, they're usually still doing whatever project it is in the next year, so they may not apply. And it turns out that the funding kind of evens out in that way. So we've done really well in spreading the meager funding that we have. We've done a good job spreading it among counties and also lagoon-wide. So since 2015, almost $10 million in funding. That is triple the amount that we would have done otherwise had we stayed under the sponsorship of our former sponsor. So one of the things we did when we instituted our CCMP is we went out to all of our partners. So all of the counties, the state government, federal government, educational organizations, everybody, and asked them what projects they had on their planning horizons for the next 5 years. And they gave us these projects, and we've kept that list active every year since 2018. So this is this year's list. And you can see that on our $2.2 million budget, we've got about $6 billion in need. We did a little math problem there, and this was with the old list. I haven't done the math on the new list yet, but if we were to try to accomplish that $6 billion in funding on our little budget, it would take something in the neighborhood of 1900 years to accomplish. So it's going to be an all hands on deck response. Funding is the greatest need that we have. We have been really successful in getting year-to-year funding for not only our projects, but for some of the other ones as well. Not all of these projects are funded. They are in planning, various degrees of planning stages. Some of them don't even have cost estimates yet. You can see on the bottom there, only 86% of the projects have a cost associated with them. So the real number for this particular list is going to be much higher. Not much higher, but higher, certainly. But this is just to keep everybody's eye focused on, we need recurring funding. If we're going to fix the lagoon, it's a big problem and it needs fixing. The good news is that funding is becoming more frequent and more available. Brevard County voters passed a half-cent sales tax that, from my point of view, and this is just an opinion as a person, not as a representative of the program, but they got 62% approval for a half-cent voluntary sales tax in the Indian River Lagoon. And they're raising over $400 million. So 48.6 million per year. It's going to be a little over 400 million at the end of the day. That is transformational money. Brevard County is going to be able to take care of many, many, many projects that otherwise would not have gotten done because there's simply not enough money in the system for it. If you want to read this plan, they update it every year. The 22 plan is on the street now. It is at the link on the bottom of the page. Other counties are doing similar things. So St. Lucie County voters approved a sales tax in, I think it was either 19 or 20. And that is divided between both road improvement and Indian River Lagoon. It's not raising nearly the money that Brevard is raising, but it's significant funding. Indian River County also allocates a portion of their sales tax to IRL infrastructure. That's on the order of about $1 or $2 million a year. Again, not the same as Brevard, but still moving in the right direction. Last year alone, our partners, so this is another thing we do every year, we go out to our partners, we say, what are you working on that doesn't involve any funding from us? So what are you doing for the lagoon that you're doing with your own funding or with funding from other partners? And you can see in the graphic there, 267 projects were ongoing last year. So, and that's not a one-time thing. That number's been ramping up for years. And then last year, South Florida and St. Johns River Water Management Districts received $25 million from the Florida legislature to administer cost share funding. So all of that's significant. We have highlighted some of that in our last year's annual report. You can get that on our website. And then I'll just leave you with this thought. The time is now to shift from being incremental to being transformational. Florida needs a clean water future. We've got, anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 people a day moving to Florida. We have these big, hairy, hard to fix problems right now today. And if we don't get a handle on that, we're going to have huge problems in the future. So moving in the direction of a clean water future is where Florida needs to be. And that part of our mission is to drag folks along, and so we can get some like-minded thinking and kind of make that happen in the future. So thanks. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. And I guess I'll just kind of scroll through and see.
Would you like me to read them out? Or Richard, would you like
Sure.
to read them?
Yeah, I was just kind of scrolling to see if there were questions. But yes, if you have them, by all means.
Go ahead, Russ.
Richard, this is your show. I defer to you if you want to read them. And Kathleen, if you want to stop sharing your slides.
Oh, yes, sorry.
I have a question, but I don't know if you can hear me.
Go right ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, we can hear
My
you.
question is, what is the plus or minus percent total nitrogen and total phosphorus has been reduced in the lagoon in the last 5 years? Maybe 10 or 20 years. Has it been reduced?
Yeah, it is reduced. We have a saying in our office that every project is progress. And so we require now, if we're going to fund somebody's project for water quality, they are required to estimate the nutrient reduction that will be achieved by the project. And so, if you do a small project, you get a small reduction. If you do a big project, you get a bigger reduction. But for example,
that's not answering my question. What percent has it been reduced?
oh, I can't answer that question. That's too
I
big.
didn't think you could. I served on the TMDL committees for years.
Mhm.
I've done a bunch of nonsense. Florida will never reduce anything because they're not going to hurt the pesticide industry and the other industries.
Thank you very much, Ron. There's an additional question is, in addition to the excess nutrients, this is from Stephen, is it possible the rising CO2 levels will also contribute to stimulating harmful algal blooms? Has anybody looked at this?
I don't think people are looking at that as an algal bloom problem, but it actually could be good for, getting people to take action. Planting trees take in, any kind of plant will take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. So one of the ways that people are looking at to, do good things for the planet to combat CO2 is by planting more trees. Planting seagrasses is going to be part of our future. We're looking at that now in our program. We've funded already 6 or 7, I think, pilot studies to look at the feasibility of, planting seagrass so that they regrow. And those things are coming down the line. I think tomorrow there's a meeting about planting seagrass and getting folks involved as volunteers to do seagrass projects.
Richard, can I follow up? This is Steve.
Yes.
So the reason for the question is I remember seeing a study, I think from Amsterdam, where they looked at that. algae is fed by CO2 and sun for photosynthesis. So the
Sure.
more CO2 that's being absorbed by the ocean and the water, in nutrient-rich waters, they found that could be providing additional stimulation for harmful algae blooms.
Mhm. Yeah,
Sense?
I understand the reason you're asking. I don't know that I can answer that. I don't think any of that research has been done in this country.
Mhm. Yeah, carbon limiting is often heterotrophic bacteria, but not so much in algae, as far as I know, at least in the open system. Let's see, what is being done to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus input? Someone asked, nutrients in general.
Yeah, so stormwater regulations have tightened up somewhat. I think 87 was the last time they got a real big revamp, and that requires all new construction to hold their stormwater on site so that there's a minimum level of getting cleaned before it gets transferred, outside of the little pond system. So that was beneficial. But the issue that we have now, there are counties working right now every day on fixing stormwater, holding more water on land, cleaning the water before it goes to the lagoon. But the problem is there's so much development going on. And I think some of our permitting processes are not keeping up with what needs to happen to keep nutrients out of the lagoon.
Very good, Kathleen. I thank you for what you're doing, but I have one other question that really.
Yeah,
Please wait your turn, Ronald, and put your question in the chat in advance so we can keep an orderly discussion, because there are other people that also have questions. Thank you.
Kathy has several questions. I don't know. I love this question about the license plate. Have you considered a license plate for raising money?
We actually have the Indian River Lagoon license plate. So the snook plate, for those of you who have that, thank you. You are going to be seeing some very exciting news from that in probably another 2 months. We are redesigning that license plate to improve its color and improve the picture on it. So we're hoping to increase those sales. And the way that license plate funding works, we put every dollar of that. We're allowed to take 5% as a marketing fee. We have not done that to date. We may do that in the future just to keep it visible and in the public eye, but we're allowed to take 5%, but 95% of that goes right into projects that help the lagoon. And we get funding for, let me think, Volusia, Brevard, and Indian River County. And then South Florida Water Management District manages the license plate funds in Martin, St. Lucie, and Palm Beach County. And so it's sort of a water management district driven thing, but we have taken over admin for that plate.
So Kathleen McElroy, can you put your statement in the form of a question, please?
I was gonna speak to Catherine's at once all the other guest questions, since it's going to be a DECF sponsored item, Richard.
Okay. And Kay Burton. Same thing. Can you put your question? Can you put that in form of a question? Are you there?
So
see.
Kay had asked.
Mine is already in the form of a question.
Kate asked, are residents of the communities doing their part to reduce pollution, such as yard fertilizers? Are they doing their part to reduce their consumption adequately?
That is a good question. There has been some research. I think UF-IFAS has done a little bit of research on that and has seen a reduction during the summer months when most counties, and I think most counties in Florida now have a summer ban on fertilizer, but all of our lagoon counties have a summer ban on fertilizer. And some of them are stricter than others, but they all at least go through, from June through September. And we have seen, it's not transformative, earth-shaking, but there is a reduction, and so people are paying attention. So we're kind of heartened by that.
And Michael Gilbrook is asking, what progress have we made in funding local stormwater management and sanitary sewage extension projects? Are you involved? Is your program involved in that, encouraging it?
That's that.
Yes, we are. So progress is being made on stormwater for sure. And a lot of the counties are starting to pay a lot of attention to septic to sewer conversions. We have funded a couple of incentive projects to get homeowners to hook up to septic, to abandon their septic and hook up to sewer where it's available. And so our funding provides them a reduction in their costs if they hook up. Again, we don't have a lot of money to, septic to sewer conversions are millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions. We provide, hundreds of thousands that can help a county, get the project over the finish line or help them, defray costs for residents, those kinds of things. We've done an awful lot of that and it's been really successful. And of course, the problem with septic is that, permitting requirements aren't there yet. So permitting has not caught up to the fact that we should be getting people off septic. And, the state allows traditional septic to continue being used when there are, lots of alternatives. Now, granted, they're more expensive. They cost people more money, but they do a much better job. I mean, a traditional septic system, on its first day, when it should be working the best that it's ever going to work, only takes care of 60 to 70% of nitrogen. The newer systems can do 90 and upward %, but we're not requiring people to use those. And we're not requiring people to hook up into sewer where it's available. And just for everybody's information, I usually have a door prize that I give for this, but can anybody tell me when septic was first introduced? Anybody have any guesses?
1901, just a completely random guess.
That's actually not too bad. I'll give you a hint. It was the same year that Abraham Lincoln became president.
Wow.
It's 1860. It came from France. And frankly, the technology for traditional septic has not changed that much. There's not been a lot of advance in septic made, but the newer systems are better. And if you can't have sewer, if you don't live in a neighborhood where there are sewer pipes, you can at least, upgrade your house to advanced septic. And so that's what we're encouraging folks to try to do. And granted, that's a tough sell because it is more expensive.
It's such a shitty subject to talk about. Sorry, couldn't help myself.
Kathleen, can I ask one quick question? Could you explain what Ron brought this up, what a TMDL is and how your program interfaces with it?
So our program, first and foremost, is a voluntary program. So we are, and not a lot of people know this, but EPA has a couple of voluntary programs, and the National Estuary Program is one of those. So we are entirely non-regulatory, but we work with the regulatory agencies to bring policies forward and work with them on, public outreach and getting people to do good things. TMDLs, it's total maximum daily loads. And what that means is it's basically a pollution budget. It's how much can a water body absorb in pollution on a daily basis without affecting the ecosystem. And those things have been researched mostly by the water management districts. I think the water management districts were instrumental in setting some of the TMDLs with FDEP. And so folks have been given these TMDLs, and they have to develop what's called a BMAP, a Basin Management Action Plan, to show how they're going to address getting their inputs down to that level where it's under the TMDL. And so most of those are in the 35, 45, 55% range for reductions. And that's why folks are required to do big stormwater projects, septic to sewer conversions. They have to show on a 5-year cycle what they've done to address their TMDL.
Oral question, Russ, I think we still have a little time.
Yes, so I wanted to well, first I wanted to thank our presenter, Indian River Lagoon, for this amazing presentation. I think we have some people from Tampa Bay Estuary Program perhaps still on the call. Are there any lessons that we, in some of the other estuary programs across the state, could adopt that Indian River Lagoon is doing very, very well, head and shoulders above its peers in their planning and in their platforming, that can be lessons for other estuary programs?
I think one of the things that we do really well is that the bulk of our funding goes out into the community for projects and programs that improve the lagoon. We're mostly focused on water quality, and we are mostly we don't do a lot of our own projects, but we fund projects that rise to the top and are able to move forward. So on an annual basis, we have many more projects that come in requesting funding than we actually have money to fund. But with the bill money coming in for the next 5 years, that's going to be an easier thing to do to get more projects out and into the ground. So our project management, I think, is really great. We have very tight restrictions. We have very tight, financial controls, and staying on top of those is what we do really well, I think.
Thank you. And then I wanted to just mention, in honor of Earth Day and this presentation on our waterways, there is a new constitutional amendment petition that is going to be being distributed, that they just finished the language on, that needs to go through legislative review for the right to healthy waters. Are you familiar with that new petition? And if anything,
Is that sort of the rights of nature kind of thing?
Yes, it was previously FL5 from the last session, which was the 5 friendly amendments, and now it's Florida Right to Clean Water, I believe .org, and it basically is giving political or statutory rights to water bodies.
I know that's been really successful in Europe, and some of the Scandinavian countries, I believe. I'm not sure how it's going to fly here, and I hope that it does, but I just don't know. We hope it flies. That'd be great, and would make it easier for practitioners trying to restore and protect ecosystems. There's no downside here for me, but I just don't know how folks are going to receive that.
We're going to be trying to, I believe our board is going to be discussing adopting that. We had adopted the FL5 ballot amendments previously last cycle. So we will be looking at that and trying to help get our partners to help with signature collections in order to do our parts as citizen advocates to bring more awareness to all of our rivers and lakes and streams, including our estuaries. Thank you for being here. Richard, if you want to finish up any questions and close us out.
Well, I want to thank Kathy for speaking. This was a wonderful and clear and inspiring talk. Your program leads the state in its sophistication and progress, as well as some of the tragedies. And I know that each of us, especially those that are following harbors regionally, are looking towards your program and looking towards moving on. We, for instance, in Charlotte County have no TMDL, and we're way down on the list of getting one. So does anybody else from representing any of the other embayments like to make final comments? Tampa, Sarasota, and John. Well, thanks again, Kathy. And thanks everyone.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. I much appreciated.
Thank you.
We appreciate everybody. We'll go ahead and close out. out. Thanks everybody for coming. We're the DECF and we're fighting for our clean environment.